We're back, and then of course, since it's the same day videos, I'm not going to set project again. We've seen that enough times, right? We'll see it some more before we're done with the term. In this case, we want to make the fan blades, right? So the fan blades, in and of themselves, we really just need one, and then we're going to duplicate special around, just like we did with our wheels on a previous video from just earlier this week, right? So we need to make the ceiling fan. Now, when we look at the ceiling fan, it actually is predominantly a box shape, right? It's definitely more rounded here in the front, but it is definitely a predominant box shape, right? So we're going to just create a cube, right? So I'm going to go to create polygon primitives cube. And of course, we need to make this smaller, so we'll hit R for scale, right? Remember, I'm just using Alt left, Alt middle, Alt right for my navigation. And I can just left drag on the green to make it a lot thinner, right? You can see those fan blades are pretty thin. There we go. Something like that should work. And then, of course, we'll scale it in this direction. And you'll notice you kind of always, kind of grab just one handle and kind of make it longer or shorter if you need to. I'm going to hit W for move, right? Just to move it out along the blue. And we can see this is still quite long, so we'll hit R for scale it in a bit more. There we go. It's getting much closer, make it a little bit wider because these fan blades are pretty wide. I'll hit W to move it up just a little bit so it's kind of right there. All right. In this case, you'll notice I did not move it on the red axis though, right? I did not move it on this axis. I just moved it on the blue and the green. Because by not moving it on the red axis, when we duplicate special later on, it'll be really easy just to duplicate from the center of the world because that's where our revolve was made from. All right, probably bring that in a little further. There we go. Maybe scale it out a little more, right? R for scale. There we go. W for move. All right. I remember the R right there too. All right. So there we go. Now at this point, you see there's a nice rounded front here. Now, of course, we could add some edge loops in and just shape this by hand to get it for us. In this case, I do want some more geometry to make it easier to draw this metal plate later on. In fact, the way I'm going to show you guys how to make the metal plate is not exactly the way I do it. I would actually use Retopo, the quadrat tool, but we kind of usually set later on. And I want to show you a certain way you can use the Multicut tool. So I'm going to show you a fairly good way to do this, but I think there is a kind of, since this is a truly separate part, I do think ultimately quadrat would be the better approach, but this will work well enough for us, and it gets to show a feature of the Multicut. So this is one of those instances where, like, even the way we did our blanket with our loft on our bed, that was more to show you a loft. I would just have probably copied some polygons off the top of the bed and just extruded border edges down and did some shaping quickly and easily, right? That really would have worked quite fast. So occasionally I'm showing you ways to do things that show you a tool and how you can use that tool. Then that's necessarily the only way to do that, or even the way I would do it personally. Most of the time, that's the case. Occasionally, this term, I've shown you things more just to show you a tool, so you know that the tool's there, and that you use it in this way to get a fairly good result. All right, so I'm going to put this in a smooth preview because I do want to get some roundness here. So I'm going to hit 3, right? Remember, 3 is smooth preview, boom, and that makes it too soft. We can already see that it is too soft, right? And that's one of the reasons why sometimes people are like, oh, I shouldn't be using smooth preview at all because it's too soft. Well, here's the thing. That's pretty soft, right? So believe it or not, a lot of things actually are a combination of hard edges and really rounded edges. So even though plenty of times, like with this, the revolve just gave us a nice low resolution mesh that's got a lot of curvature already. Our desks, there's plenty of times when you just work low res, no smooth preview. But there are plenty of times, hard surface and definitely character creatures, where smooth preview can be a great shortcut, right? So in this case though, I need to harden this shape up. And in particular, that hardness comes on the back and kind of on the sides here. Not so much here. That's actually pretty rounded. So I'm going to go to Multicut, and I'm going to hold down Control, right? Because that lets us put an edge loop in. Put it back there, and I'm going to put another one back here. And you see how this is automatically already starting to shape this up a lot, or sharpen this up a lot, right? I'm even going to kind of do a quick Control Shift, right? Because remember my Multicut right here, the snap percentage is set to 50, right? So that means when I hold down Control to put an edge loop in, and I hold down Shift as well, Control Shift, it's going to put the edge loop in, but it's also going to snap it to the 50%, which is the middle. There we go. Now, with those in place, I could do some shaping now, right? I'll harden this up in a little bit. So I'm going to hit W for Move Tool, right? And I'm going to hold down right mouse button on my object, right? Put my cursor over the object, hold down right mouse button, edge. And I'm going to double left click, right? Because if you double left click on an edge, it selects the edge loop. Now I'm going to move those back because you'll notice how it sharpens that shape up even more. If I move it this direction, it softens it, right? So much like we were talking about having more points at areas where you want there to be a sharper corner when you draw the curve, remember, it's that same thing. We've talked about it a couple times now in our smooth preview. It's the same thing on a smooth preview. The closer this edge loop is to this corner, it makes that rounding that the smooth preview does, right? Because smooth preview always creates a bit of rounding because there's actually technically more geometry there, right? If you actually look at it, you can kind of see that there's more polygons. But it rounds off the shapes of those polygons. So it creates them, and where there's corners, it kind of sucks in, averages the positions of those vertices at the corners, and that creates that rounded shape. But it's quite predictable. So it's just kind of knowing, hey, put edge loops closer to corners, and it makes the rounding of the smooth preview smaller, which makes it look sharper. So in this case, we've got those in there. And I'm going to take this one and probably move it out a little more. And this one, maybe move it out and back a little bit, right? And you see how that starts to kind of create that rounding shape for us? I think I'll even go to face mode and bring this face in a little bit on the red. But you notice how with just a handful of edge loops, right? And a little bit of shaping, see how we can actually get that kind of shape to look pretty good, pretty much the way we wanted it to, right? So pretty easy to get that shape nice and neat looking without having to add a million edge loops in, right? It's going to look horrible in low res, right? But it's often easier to get the kind of core, nice, gradual rounding with less geometry. That's what's great about the smooth previews. You didn't have to actually add a million edge loops and kind of keep tinkering a little bit with every edge loop. Some of you guys noticed that the more geometry you got on a mesh, it was easier to make lumps or weird creases, right? So that's one of the great powers of smooth preview when you know how to use it well, is that if you keep it simple, right? KISS, keep it simple, stupid. Basically, you are able to get that nice, gradual, clean roundness of shape without having to have millions of edge loops. And then when you smooth it later on, your low res is actually still pretty efficient, but it was actually easier to get that nice, rounded shape. So smooth preview, when you really know how to do it well, and there's a lot of professional modelers that don't really know how to use it well, and so they don't use it. But if you know how to use it well and when it's appropriate, it's actually a great shortcut. Remember, you want to smooth it though, because you want your low res to look good. That does not look good as a low res. All right, but you notice how easy it was to get that nice, cool, rounded shape there with that. Now, usually fans twist a little bit, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to face mode, and I'm going to select these faces just on the end, right? So remember, hold down right mouse button over the object, face, and I turn rotate on. I'm just going to rotate those just a little bit, right? Just to kind of get a little bit of that twist for us. So there we go. We got a little bit of that twist. I can go to edge mode here, and I can just double click on that edge loop and just maybe do a little bit of twist there, but not quite as much. There we go. So it's kind of a little gradual twist because you want it to be pretty subtle. You don't want it to be too pronounced, right? But these usually twist a little bit because they have to kind of push the air, right? And if they're just exactly perfectly straight, they don't push the air. But you notice how because we had such little geometry, it made it really easy to make these shapes and get a nice little shape adjustment. There is, of course, ways you can use soft selection for that. We'll see soft selection, which is right here on the Project 6. We don't really need it here. Although, if you did want to use it, right, grab the faces that you want, or edges or vertices. You can go into soft selection, turn it on. B turns it on. So if you hit B, it turns it on. If you hit B, it turns it off. If you hold down B and drag to the left or right, it makes the soft selection bigger. Right? So you can make that soft selection fade out even more. And then you see when we twist these, you see how it actually does a little bit of twist to that one as well. That's what soft selection does, and it works with move as well. Right? So you notice that, see how there's kind of more of a gradual shaping there? Whereas if that's off, you know, in this case you still get it a bit, but not as much. Often when you don't have a lot of geometry, soft selection is not necessary. The denser the mesh is, the more soft selection becomes useful. But that is there. Some of you guys have accidentally turned it on by accident, and you're like, what's going on, right? So that's what that is. All right. So in this case, I do need to sharpen up the sides. So we go to Multicut. I'm going to zoom in because it'll be easier to get this. Hold down Control. And remember, it's always perpendicular to the edge that you're over, right? So if I want to put the edge loop in around this way, I have to put it over this edge. And then we'll kind of put a second one. Oh, not that direction. There we go. And now you see how that nicely kind of hardens up that edge. So once again, you can see that once you really understand how to work with multi-cut well, it's awesome, right? Or smooth preview. Not appropriate on all models, right? But definitely a part of your arsenal that you can take advantage of in the right context. All right. Now in this case, I need more geometry to make that multi-cut that I'm going to use in a minute here easier. So at this point, we can smooth it, right? Because in low res, blocky, right? So remember, 1 turns it off, 3 turns it on. I'm going to hit 1 just to go to low res just to show the difference. Remember, in Modeling Toolkit, there is smooth. It's actually over here as well, right? Remember, these tools are all kind of in these menus. It's just that Modeling Toolkit gives you kind of a quicker place to see them right there. So we'll hit smooth. Division of 1's fine. We can hit Q to turn that off, right? Because we don't need it on anymore. And now you'll notice it didn't use the default 2, right? Smooth preview by default set to 2. So it won't be quite as rounded as that smooth preview, but you see how it still gives you a pretty nice looking low res? And it's still mimicking that, right? If I did a second smooth, now you see it looks just like the smooth preview, because the smooth preview by default is showing 2 and not 1. Page up and page down in smooth preview will allow that, right? So if I undo back to before I smoothed really quick, page down on your keyboard, you see how it sets it to 1? So page up and page down actually go up and down your resolution levels for your smooth preview. Remember, 1 turns it off, 3 turns it on. Page up and page down will actually control the resolution. In this case, I'm just going to smooth it once because that'll give us that, like we said, the nice good look. And now we see we've got a pretty good looking low res that's still quite efficient for this. If need be, you can always go to edge mode and double click on an edge loop. Hit Control Delete. Take that edge loop out just to keep it a little more polygonally efficient, right? You can always go back in and take an edge loop out or two if you don't really need them. In this case, pretty much just about everything is contributing to the shape in some way, shape, or form. That was probably the one that was expendable. But remember, Edit Mesh, Control Delete, Delete Edge Vertex. It takes the edge loop and the vertices out with it, right? If you just hit Delete, it leaves the vertices behind. You have a bunch of 6-sideds here. So Control Delete, take an edge loop out. All right. So now what we want to do is we want to use the multi-cut to create this shape. So I'm going to kind of go in here because it's going to be right about there. And it's going to go kind of arched from this side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to multi-cut again. And we know that multi-cut, if you hold down Control, puts an edge loop in, right? So if you hold down Control, it puts an edge loop in. If you left-click drag off of the object, it does a slice, right? We saw that on our trim. But believe it or not, if you just put your cursor, no control, right? You're not holding down Control. If you just put your cursor with multi-cut on, no control being held down, right? That's Control. So just multi-cut on. Just put your cursor kind of over the mesh. You'll notice it highlights edges or vertices. So you'll notice what I can do is I can left-click on a vertex, and then I can go up to this edge here, click there, and then I could click here, right? And you see how it's kind of adding these edges. Now you can actually put one in the middle, right? And you can even go through 2 of them, right? And then you can even go back and adjust these. So I can kind of play with this one a little bit, play with that one a little bit if we wanted to, and then continue on. So believe it or not, multi-cut by default with no control held down and not dragging off here, if you just click on vertices, edges, or faces, it'll allow you to start to manually draw in an edge loop. And you'll notice that you can go to edges, you can go in the center of a vertex or anywhere in a face, sorry, not a vertex, face, and you can even skip a couple, right? So from here I skipped a couple, so it'll actually will take into consideration going through multiple edges if you want to. And then you can even go back and adjust these positions, right? So if I want this to be a little more in, I can. So you can actually even go back in there and adjust those positions a little bit. So ultimately you see that the kind of multi-cut manual can kind of be neat to create an interesting shape like this. So I'll hit enter and it makes it final. And you'll notice it is creating some n-gons, but since this is going to stay low res, that's okay, right? It's not going to deform, it's not going to change shape. We've already got a pretty good looking low res for this. So we'll be okay with a few n-gons here. But I wanted to make sure you guys saw that how Multicut manual works, right? You just click on an edge, and like I said, you can drag between multiple, and it'll cut those. You can go back and adjust them. You can put them in between faces, right? To really do some interesting manual cutting. So I just want to make sure you guys saw and have an opportunity to make a more interesting shape like this with Multicut. So now I'm going to hold down right mouse button, face, right? And of course, tab for drag select, right? Drag select is useful. Tab is the quick key for it. It turns it on. You have to hold down tab though, right? If you just want to turn it on, leave it on, you can. And then you just hold down left mouse button and move your cursor, right? And you see basically whatever it kind of touches, it'll select. But it doesn't select anything on the back sides or anything else because camera-based selection is on, right? Pick marquee, it's off. That's why when you do a box select, it kind of grabs everything, right? But you can turn that off and on, right? In this case, though, I love tab because if you hold down tab, it's on as long as tab's held down. And then I just left mouse drag. And it's just a great fast way to select stuff like that. You just hold down left mouse and move your cursor. You drag select. And then what we could do is we could extrude this. And I'll hit W for move to move it down, right? And then I think we'll do a little more. I don't want the plate to be too big. So we'll do another extrusion. And in this case, I'm going to leave these options up though. I'm going to move it on the blue arrow a little bit, but you notice how it's going to, in this case, since all these normals are basically coplanar, the normal direction will work fairly well. But remember, you can actually use that offset. Remember how we saw that on our door? If I take a small number for offset, like 0.1, you see how it'll kind of start to slowly scale that all in. I want that a little bigger though. So let's try 0.5. There we go. And you notice how that kind of scales in this whole thing uniformly, right? You see how that kind of that thickness is this uniform all the way around? That's what's really cool about offset and the extrude feature. So remember, when you're doing architectural stuff and you want to extrude and kind of create these little inset paneling, offset, right? That's a great little cool feature in your extrude options box, right? So remember, you have offset, and that can allow you to kind of do a nice little uniform scale in there. All right, so that gives us kind of that little plating. And then we see that there's kind of this little metal part that kind of comes out. That's not quite the whole size of it, but it's a lot of it. And so what I can do is I can just kind of go in here and kind of probably grab these two faces. And we can just hit extrude. W for move tool, just to kind of move back a little bit. Maybe do a second extrusion here. Move that back in a little bit to kind of create the little kind of connector part. And there we go, there's that little plate there, right? Obviously I probably could have had it more rounded at the corner there. That's the kind of thing that we could honestly, if we want to, still go to vertex mode, grab those verts. I'll hit 4 for wireframe just to make sure I didn't grab anything on the other side. 5, right? 4 for wireframe, 5 for shaded. And I can just move these in. And remember, you can actually use that constraint square. Bring that in a little bit just to round it off. There we go. In this case, it's one piece. Remember, you could always select faces and extract them if you wanted to. You could have always just duplicated those. In this case, it's fine for us to leave it as one piece. Like I said, I would have probably used quad draw to actually just draw this shape on there and then thicken it because it really is a separate metal part. But I wanted you guys to use Multicut to kind of do this neat shape and to actually have at least once use Multicut this way. That way you've seen it Multicut for adding normal edge loops, right? As well as for slicing, but even for manually drawing it in. And now you'll notice how kind of in certain areas it has a hard time working because of the n-gons, right? So remember that. N-gons do stop the Multicut from working properly, right? That's actually on the back, not here. But in this case, you notice how it looks pretty good in low res. And even if we hit 3 for smooth preview, you see how it's not that bad. So even sometimes the smooth preview n-gons don't really cause a catastrophic problem. You see how it does kind of pinch that shape in, can pinch that shape in a little bit weird there. So you remember, quads are what we strongly prefer, but if you're staying low res and it's flat surfaces, n-gons, you can kind of start to get away with here and there. All right, so there's our fan blade. And we got to kind of see the cool extra functionality of Multicut. And now what we need to do is we need to kind of copy this whole entire fan blade over. All right, so in this case, I actually feel like that shape there kind of is a little off, so I'll move this back in here just a little bit. There we go. Just to make sure that that guy's pretty close to center. All right, and remember, the way we copy these fan blades over, right, is the same way we did our spokes, our wheels, our buttons on our clock radio. Remember, you hit Edit Pivot, and you turn Snap to Grid on, right? Particularly if you built this revolve to be on the 0 of the world. And then I can just grab the blue arrow to kind of drag it into the center, grab the red arrow to make sure both those axes are centered on the 0. We turn Edit Pivot off. We turn Snap to Grid off, right? So remember, these magnets are your snap tools. In this case, we're snapping to the grid units. And Edit Pivot allows you to move the manipulator, the center of the object itself, somewhere else. Remember, if you ever need to center this back on here, modify Center Pivot. But in this case, we wanted the center of this object to be the center of this one, because that one, when we duplicate it, it'll go around. And we go to Edit, Duplicate Special, Options box, right? And in this case, remember, we have some of these options from last time. We saw them kind of on our wheels, copying our wheels around. In this case, copy will be fine, but if you really wanted to be able to change the original, or at least one of them, and have it affect the other ones, instance, right? Copy makes these fully independent, so if you change one, it doesn't affect the other ones. Instance will make them so they're all interconnected, so that if you change one, it will change the other ones. So it kind of depends on what you need. In this case, I think we're done, so we'll just use copy. But in this case, I only have 4 fan blades, right? So I really only need 3 copies, right? Also, my rotation is going to be on the Y. Remember, it's always X, Y, Z. So that's why I select the middle column, or the middle column of the rotate. And we have to think of, well, what's 360 divided by 4? 90, right? So a little bit of simple math there. Duplicate Special. There's your fan blades. And that is your ceiling fan. Your chords can probably be done with, that's just a cube with a little bit of shaping and smooth preview. I'm not expecting you guys to make all those little dots, so you can just use kind of your extrude tube feature to kind of make that hose if you wanted to. Pretty easy. That could even be one of those things where maybe you just do a cylinder and then just kind of extrude a couple polygons at the top and rotate them to get that shape, right? But that's the ceiling fan. And it's just a great way to kind of reinforce some of these major tools, get you guys to see a little bit extra about the multi-cut, but mostly stuff we've done before, right? So that is the ceiling fan. And then I'll make one more video for you guys cleaning up the outliner again, of course.